Hello, and welcome to the Early American Brass Band Podcast. I'm Chris Troiano, joined always by Stephen Canastrese.
Hello.
This is episode 37, and today we're speaking with Bernhard Kirchner. Bernhard is with the Dodworth Saxhorn Band in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's been with them since 1998 as the solo E-flat horn player. He was also the curator for the instruments for the band, as well as serving as the arranger for the band. So we had a really awesome chat with him, getting to hear about his backstory and his experiences with the Dodworth Saxhorn Band, in addition to getting to hear the history of the 19th century original Dodworth Saxhorn Band. So we're really excited to share this discussion with you today.
Yeah, it was definitely great to finally get someone from Dodworth on the show. We think you'll really enjoy all the history and the stories that he has about the band. So if you like what you're hearing, you can support the show on Patreon. That's the easiest way to do it. And we also have a Teespring store where there's some physical merchandise up there if you'd rather do it that way. And then something that's free, it doesn't cost you anything, is supporting us over on YouTube. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, which really helps spread the show to a wider audience. And we're also on social media, so you can give us a follow on all the social media platforms. That way you can stay up to date with everything that we release and all news related to the show.
And without further ado, here is episode 37 with Bernhard Kirchner. Thank you so much to Bernhard Kirchner for coming on to the Early American Brass Band Podcast. We really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to share with us your experiences with early American brass bands and the Dodworth Saxhorn Band. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, glad to be here. I was totally flabbergasted that anybody would even call me about this sort of thing. I'll tell you what.
We're excited to talk to you. I know I've been listening to y'all's CDs for a long time now, so it's really exciting to finally get to talk to somebody from the band and the arranger at that. So we'll get to talk about your music and some of the history of your group and the historical group as well. So speaking of yourself and getting to learn a little bit about you, can we maybe hear a little bit about your musical background and maybe leading up into how you became interested in this world of early brass music?
Yeah, it's well, you got 2 to 3 years. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I grew up with German parents. They're both from Germany. My dad was a good amateur. He learned accordion and the guitar and harmonica. I also like to sing tenor. My mom, however, had a different story. Now, her dad, my grandfather, was quite a good pianist. And he had made sure that he wanted all his kids to learn piano. He had 9 of them. Unfortunately, Mom was stubborn because she saw a movie that had a girl playing trumpet. And she goes to Dad, I want to play trumpet. Dad says, you need to learn piano. I want to play trumpet. So it goes back and forth. And he says, well, you can't play trumpet because that's not a girl's instrument. So, yeah, 1940s Germany, Right. Sorry. Anyway, but there was always classical music playing in my house, as well as German popular music, for that matter. And so stuff like in America, I mean, that pretty much got covered up in our household. Not to say it was a bad thing, but it was always classical music, which is great. I still enjoy listening to that all the time. And then, okay, so we'll just go through some of my thing here. It's the mid 70s. And of course they had the oil embargo. So parents decided to move down south, get better jobs. Jobs are more secure where there's more jobs to be had. Michigan, they sort of dried up. And then we come back and, luckily we moved back to a district here in Michigan at Livonia that still allowed beginning band in 7th grade. And then, so I picked the trumpet because basically it was the most popular. I mean, it was only like a handful of us too. I remember an oboe, a couple of percussion, a girl wanted to play trombone. Anyway, a bunch of others. And in the meantime, in that same year, I got braces, so that kind of mixed me up. The same year I start playing, I'm getting mixed up. But with that, nonetheless, I still seem to have a talent for it. And I was like, this is weird, Now the family moves at the end our family moved again at the end of that year, school year, in the springtime. So now the new band director I get is here in South Lyon, Michigan, and that director at the time was Tom Young, and between him and his colleague Frank Kachelko, they were like one of the tops, at least in this area. Anyway, unfortunately he could not have me in band right away because the band was going on a trip to DC or somewhere. I forget exactly. So all I could do was sit in the office until they got back, and then when he come back, I borrow a horn, but I'm having a heck of a time with it. This is all leading into what's coming up obviously next. Now, what he has me do, so now I have to sit in his office for the next 2 weeks because I couldn't really play the stupid braces and all that. We're not letting me play as well as I did like just even a month ago. So what he has me do is here, take this mouthpiece, buzz 5 minutes, take a break, 10, 15, 20 minutes or something like that, buzz again. And then, before the end of class, try to get one more session of just buzz one note, 1 or 2 notes. Don't worry about nothing else. Just buzz. Okay. And after a couple of days of this, I see on his desk, is that he has a dictionary of music. Just one little nice fat volume by Willie Appel. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, I'm going to start reading. What the heck, why not? And I almost get through cover to cover before the end of the 2 weeks. And what's interesting about this is the first time I see any glimpse of antique instruments, including, guess what? Saxhorns.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, here's a 7th grader or 8th grader, whatever it might be at this time, aware of all these antique instruments.
Yeah. Well.
Serpents, cornet, and saxhorns. And I'm like, wow, this is some fun, fancy stuff going on here. This is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And that kind of just went away after that. But anyway, so he lets me play in class, and it ends up, by summertime, he says, you know what, the braces are still probably giving you some problems. Here, take this fat recording, tuba, a 20J with 3 valves, the real thick, heavy ones.
Yeah.
Here, take this home for the summer and let it loosen you up. I don't know what I'm doing. I just take the thing with me. So I was taking lessons still on trumpet and played that another couple more years. We'll fast forward to like 10th grade now. In 10th grade, the first year I get to see what French horns are. Now I still had that that classical sound in my ear. I just didn't know what it really looked like.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm like, wow, this thing is backwards.
Yeah.
But, well, you figure with the thumb valve, that's the reverse of your 4th valve on a euphonium if you're using 4 valves.
That's right.
And that just twisted my brain around for quite a while. But oddly enough, I kept it going. And I got to play an interlocking at All States for 2 summers as a euphonium player, even sitting first chair. And then the senior year of my high school, the tuba player was on her way out. It was actually a girl. She was on her way out, and I got to jump in and play tuba now.
Nice.
And I took that over the summer and started learning that before my senior year started. In the meantime, of course, I went to interlock, and then so now it comes to time to decide for what school I want to go to. So I okay, whatever. I figured I'd audition at Eastern Michigan, and that's where I took my trumpet and a horn and a tuba over there to audition for some scholarship money.
Right.
I figured, okay, let's see what I can find.
Yeah.
Now here comes this guy right in front of me. He's from Detroit. He's a real hot shot. He's got all 4 of his trumpets, and he plays like flawlessly. He's like 18, 19 years old, not even yet. He brings an accompanist. I didn't think of it to bring a pianist at all. I go in there and I pretty much drop that thing all over the ground. It's just, I just totally stunk on trumpet. And the committee's looking at me going, yeah, that wasn't your best, was it today? Yeah. Oddly enough, horn was my best, which was weird, but I didn't know how to read horn music yet. I played a trumpet piece on it.
Interesting.
On the horn. And then they kind of liked my tuba skills. I mean, I did get a 1 at festival just not that long ago. And I'd only been playing tuba for a few months.
Yeah.
So they did like both of those, but they said, I think horn was your best audition. I'm like, cool. Guess I'm going to be a horn player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I got to go
Decision
home
made
and learn
for
how to
you.
play. Yeah. So now I got to home and figure out how to play horn parts, which is another brain twister in
That's right.
itself, and then go back to interlocking and still play euphonium as well.
Yeah, well,
That's just goofy. And so I started as a horn major and a tuba minor at 1985 at Eastern Michigan. Now, while I was there, I took all the instrument classes. It didn't matter what it was. I mean, they did have a minimum. You had to take at least, one of each style, whether it was a brass or wind or percussion, so on. I took them all. I didn't care. And I even learned bassoon enough I could play in a wind quintet as a bassoon player.
Nice.
Yeah.
Guess what they put on the stand right in front of me the first day?
Like Poulenc or something?
Poulenc Swiss tour?
Yeah.
Poulenc Swiss tour. Yeah, and I'm the bassoon player. I'm looking at this, I'm going, oh my God. Okay, can I have my real part now? Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Nope, that was it. Oh, so we had to play it for recital. And I'm like, oh, joy. Somewhere I could still find that program. I didn't look for it. Oh, my. But yeah, I took all the instrument classes from top to bottom, whatever they were, strings, all the string classes, and so on. And in the meantime, I'm still kind of learning in the background about all the antique instruments and stuff. And since I'm being a horn major, I get to play, natural horn stuff too.
Natural, yeah.
So yeah, I'm just getting totally immersed. One day I'm visiting a private instrument repairman, his shop, which was near U of M at the time, in Michigan, that is. And he has all these brass instruments in whatever shape and size and age and whatever, all over his shop. I mean, you name it, he practically had it. Double bell euphoniums of all sorts, and I can't think of them all. So I said, wow, these are really cool, You mind if I try a couple? He's like, okay, go ahead. I pick up a couple. And so I'm just playing a couple things on it. At one point, he hands me an over-the-shoulder alto saxhorn. Okay. And he says, hey, I bet you can't play a scale on this. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So he gives me a thing, and I play a scale flawlessly. And he looks at me and he says, that's not possible on this one. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. Whatever, Oddly enough, fate was realized that day, but it was didn't know about it for another few years, and then it was really strange. I mean, and I'd still go there get my horns repaired, but he still, and I didn't know that he was playing in the Dodworth Band on this horn, on that particular horn. I just didn't know that, but he's still an excellent repairman. We still go to him. It's not Tim Holmes. All right. So before I left for master's school in '93, after I graduated EMU, I see on a news article with a photo of the Dodworth Band, that'll be the new faction, on my tuba professor's door. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. How cool was that, And then I see him as soon as next time I saw him, I says, hey, if you want me to sub, let me know. I'd be really interested in figuring this out. So he's like, yeah, okay, sure. But I didn't get anything. So at master's school, Akron, I'm assigned to play first horn in the orchestra, and I also play kids concerts in a brass quintet the first year and in a woodwind quintet the second year. And I did arrangements for both for various reasons. And while I was there, I also took a few lessons on tuba with Tucker Jolly. So, and he said I sounded like a tuba player who hadn't been playing in a while.
Better than not a tuba player at all, right?
Well, but I could play. But people who would listen to me in the horn studio would be impressed that I was playing the thing at all, including some of the tuba students, grad students. I was kind of, and then I even got hired to play as a sub on both tuba. At one point for a community orchestra, I got paid to play trombone. I even got paid to play recorders. By this time, I had picked up 5 sizes of recorders from Sacronino down to bass. Okay, and so I learned them pretty well. So on another recital with my brass quintet, we played this medley of tunes by G.W.E. Friedrich.
Mm-hmm.
I still have that program somewhere. I couldn't find it in time. And you know, Friedrich was a bandsman, and he also wrote the Brass Band Journal, or compiled that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he would also take and make slower tunes into marches and stuff like that, or other dance forms. So by '96, I've graduated and I'm back and I'm playing horn in area groups, and so I'm working as a brass specialist, as you can kind of imagine at this point. I'm getting hired to play all these brass instruments. So I've gotten a really unique path that I've somehow carved out, mostly by circumstance.
Yeah.
It seems like your experience with playing all the different brass and even woodwinds and the experience on all these different instruments really is, like you were saying, helped with your marketability, but also probably gave you the proper insight into creating really good arrangements. You knew all the idiosyncrasies of each instrument. You knew ranges, you knew technical limitations, and I'm sure that really helped with your writing as well.
Even clef reading. I actually learned to read tenor clef back in high school on my own.
Yeah. So it seems like through your musical career, through your masters and everything, the Dodworth Saxhorn Band was kind of always like peering over your shoulder and like kept on like kind of creeping up and was always kind of there. So maybe before we dive into your more hands-on experience with that band and talking about the band as it exists today, maybe we can talk a little bit about who that band was historically and some of the historical figures that were associated with that band in the 19th century.
Absolutely. Certainly. So the original Dodworth people, eventually it was, husband and wife, though, but four brothers, including the father. You don't really hear about the women. You're not supposed to talk about the women. That's just the thing they were supposed to do, just kind of be seen, but not necessarily heard.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Or talked about. I don't know what that is. But the father did write like a polka in her name. It's Callie Polka. Her name was actually Talantha. Anyway, so it's the Dodworths, Thomas Sr., Alan and Harvey, both also born in the Sheffields. They immigrated from Sheffields in the early 1820s. And then Charles and Thomas Jr. were born here, as well as I know of one sister. There's possibly two. I couldn't remember, but I'll talk about Mary later on. It's kind of part of the newer faction of this type of band.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but she's important if nowadays. Yeah. So I will talk about Mary. Too bad. But nonetheless, okay. So they did immigrate from Sheffield Islands. This family, and they joined what was called the Independent Band at the time, and then they also took over another one called the Castle Garden Band, which was made up of curiously black musicians, all black musicians. Strangely enough. So, but now they kind of joined both of those bands together, renamed it the National Brass Band, and eventually it became the Dodworth Band after a few more years. Now, these guys were exceptionally talented people. They all played different instruments, whether it be a string or a flute or a cornet, a fife. And they also composed music. And I'll give you a story about how talented. Here's a quick one. So Alan, the oldest son, so let's say that they were in what at the time was called the National Brass Band, and one of the principal bugle player at the time decided he didn't want to play the next show, so that gave him like 3 days, and they still wanted to play the show. So Alan says, "I'll do it," But he had only been playing trombone. He's only like a kid. He's not. I don't think he was a teenager at the time. So, somebody gives him an E flat cornet. He's never played this thing before, and he starts practicing like a madman on the thing. And by the time the concert rolls around 3 days later, you thought he'd been playing it forever.
Mm.
That's the kind of talent this family was.
Yeah.
Okay, so they could literally be musical chameleons in terms of instruments too, which is really, I thought that was really cool. And then Harvey, we saw here, he became the director finally of what was then finally called the Dodworth Band at the age of 16. He's the one waving the stick, you know. But he was still a fabulous cornetist, as well as a fife player, flute player, violin player. They had a national reputation. They also ran the music scene throughout New York for nearly 60 years. So between the 1830s and the 90s, when finally Harvey had finally passed away. His younger brother is still around till after 1900. Charles, I think it was. And then on his epitaph for Harvey, he is considered the father of American brass band music, which is really cool. And their reputation, they made sure that they were known for their clarity, refinement, professionalism, and overall excellence. And I'll give you a quote even from Patrick Gilmore when he finally was in swing, per se, in the early 1870s. So he would say, he had said something: brass instruments were never played with greater delicacy or refinement than by the Dodworth organization. To be a member of this organization or to be graduated from it was to be looked upon as a star in the profession.
That's a great quote.
So
yeah.
that's definitely a compliment coming from Gilmore.
Oh, for sure.
Understand his reputation later on in this particular century.
Yeah.
Okay. So in addition to their high reputation, they ran the music scene from top to bottom. They imported music, of course, composed music. They had better times than others, and my biased opinion, I guess. Of course, they designed their iconic horn, which we'll get to in a minute. They're importing dances. Oh, they ran 3 dance academies, and Alan, the oldest son, was primarily the person who ran those academies. I'd once bought a manual with that he had wrote, and it was from 1900, like one of the last copies. I can't find it on the thing. But even his academies were around so long that even the Roosevelts, before they even became famous, were involved in learning dance from Dodworth's Academy.
Wow.
They also had a music store. They ran a publishing company. And they also trained, I don't know if these numbers are right, but this is what I got. They trained about 500 bandsmen and 50 band leaders for the military.
Nice.
Wow.
Okay. Now they themselves. Now most bands, somehow for some reason had to attach themselves to some kind of military faction for whatever reason. It's still beyond me personally. But Dodworth did not. Although they did serve in the military for 3 months. This is documented. So yeah, at the second Battle of Bull Run or Manassas. And there's a cute story that Harvey would like to tell at the time. He says, so we're helping with the wounded. They don't really go out and actually be in the battles themselves.
Yeah.
But they would help with the casualty issues and stuff like that. So one guy is laying on the ground. Harvey comes by and he's helping him. He's helping cleaning him up. His ankle is in tatters. And the guy says, he looks at Harvey's belt and he sees a horn hanging from it. And he's going, "Hey, mister, is that an E flat?" "Why, yes, it is." "Oh, I used to play one." So they became fast acquaintances for the day, but after that, they don't know anything about him.
Hopefully
That's
he made it.
They talked the rest of the day, as far as you know, but he says, I don't know what happened to the poor fellow after that.
Thanks.
So that's certainly a documented story on that part. And then they also wrote a brass band school. Alan Dodworth was mainly responsible for that one. And in there is all kinds of things about how to set up a band, what kind of instrumentation, and various forms that you can take as a band, whether you're marching or on the field or whatever the case may be, and how to behave, and lots of their arrangements, of course, in it too. So there's that. And like I said, they were very versatile musicians. They could function as a cornet band. They didn't like to call themselves necessarily a bugle band or necessarily a brass band. They call themselves a cornet band. But since they were also versatile as strings, and then they were among the first to employ people who were reed players, like saxophones, clarinets, or flutes, even circular brass, helicons. They could be employed as soloists and provide music for all occasions. I mean, if they're also importing horns and stuff, they could also provide the instruments for all the occasions too. And so they were around long enough. They played the inaugurations for 10 different presidents. And if it wasn't for them, they wouldn't. The New York Philharmonic would have not started, at least not as soon as it did, which was 1842. And at least 3 of them played in the first concert. And that was definitely Harvey on first chair cornet, as well as piccolo, his brother Charles on violin, and then the dad, Thomas Sr., who played trombone, who was also the treasurer for New York Phil back in the 1840s. Yeah. They also started weekly concerts in the Central Park on Manhattan Island. They paved the way for all the touring bands coming down the line now, which would be Gilmore, of course, and Sousa, who was born in 1854. Krill, and there was a couple more I can't remember right now. And they only had 2 actual rivals, and one was Grafula from Spain, who arrived late 1850s, early 1860s, and he was a fine arranger, knew his craft very well. So and then his band was the 7th Regiment. They got, like I said, they got to get tied to some kind of military thing. And so that was definitely one rival that they had, but all that time before that, they were pretty much the scene. And then Gilmore coming in the late 1870s, and they definitely paid their members quite well. And then, even a band such as with their caliber, they would, sometimes they can go stale,
Yeah.
So at one point they knew of Gilmore, and they collaborated with the guy. And 1879, and here's a copy of that article. It says they were buying this garden. It was actually Gilmore's Garden, is what they called it. A wealthy brewer placed $100,000 at their disposal, and they were going to have a band consisting of at least, and it's in italics, at least 123 trained instrumentalists under the personal leadership of Mr. Dodworth. So imagine a band that size playing these type of horns. That's not exactly quiet.
And I know Gilmore's Garden eventually turned into Madison Square Garden in New York.
Yeah, good point. Good there. So that's what it was. That's what it did before. Was Gilmore, and them collaborated, at least for one thing, and that was like I said, 1879. So even the Dodworth Band at that point was starting to fade slowly, but it took another almost 15 years, 10 to 15 years before. The sax horns were only sold in Sears catalog.
Yeah, and
they're pretty much not anymore. And it's really sad that none of this is actually taught in music history at any part. I mean, you could spend an entire semester on this stuff. I'm not kidding. So, and then of course, with their invention per se, I mean, they didn't actually make that horn by themselves. Their iconic sax horn, it all got lumped in. I'll tell you about that in a second. They started with something in the middle, like an alto and a tenor,
with the over-the-shoulder variety.
Right, and that patent came about in 1838. Dodworth's horn creation like that was the first instance of what's now lumped in together as sax horn. Shouldn't have been. He wanted to call it, and he gave this weird French 1100s Hittite name, Nova Ibor Corno. Okay, New York horn is how it translates. Nova, new, Ebor, or depending on how you spell it, sometimes it goes back and forth between EBOR or EBER.
Gotcha.
Cornell. So New York corn. That's how it comes out. But the name never really stuck.
Yeah.
They were adamant about keeping it as a New York horn. I mean, the horns that they designed did not, of course, weren't like everybody was like all gung ho for them. That people are like, oh, a lot of harumphing going on for some reason. Now we got to have this horn. Now we got to have whatever.
Yeah.
No, then they find people started to copy that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, and of course, on the other side of the pond, you get our esteemed other guy,
Mr. Sax.
Yeah.
So him and his brother and his father were all instrument builders. Now, in terms of Sax's idea, now remember he was contracted for the French military, so he took bugles, okay, and he just made the improvements such that they would point upright, especially because they were still sitting on horseback. I threw away the picture now. So you had an example, and then he liked the ones with the Berliner fat piston.
Mm-hmm.
If you're familiar with those.
Yeah.
I mean, but people would start to copy that and put all different kinds of things on type of valve clusters on there, whether it be the Ullmann's Vienna valve or the canister valve by Blumel, which we know is a rotary valve, but back then it was called a canister valve, or Klappenventil, which was the clappers inside of a chamber, a box, a rectangular chamber, all kinds of stuff like that. So he came up with a similar idea for the French military, and his patent for Saxhorn was 1846. So from 1838 to 46, 8 years difference between what Dodworth came up with compared to what Mr. Sax came up with first.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, 2 years later, he came up with that other weird aberration that he's famous for, of course, the saxophone, which is really a hybrid of 4 different instruments, if you ever think about it. You have a clarinet reed.
Yeah.
You have a clarinet reed on a key bugle body, but the key work system, that is a combination of both recorder and oboe.
Yeah, well.
And 1848 was the first patent for that, and there was a World's Fair at the time, and that's where it was first brought out.
Yeah, but I was kind of wondering what kind of if you want to call it the end of the old, the historical Dodworth Saxhorn Band. Did they just kind of
right away.
The times changed and they kind of petered out, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, the end of the Dodworth era was brought about. Let me just put it this way: the price of progress is progress itself. Sometimes. So remember, they've been around now 60 years, close to 60 years. Played with all these presidents, did all this fabulous work. So like I said, they paved the way for the touring band. So like people like Sousa, and I have a picture of his dad. And I've talked with Sousa number 4 too, John Phillip, and his dad's name was Antonio. Any rate, so you got touring bands for like Gilmore and stuff. So they kind of took over that scene. So now, and certainly now that we had the railroad too, it was very easy to go on tour.
Yeah, true.
Okay. So I don't know how far they toured. That's none of my business. But but even Dodworth had their national reputation, which they upheld for the longest time. But now you got these other ones, and their musicianship skills were really, really, really good. And imagine getting paid like by Jules Levy, who made $10,000 in a year just playing his cornet. But that was 1880s money. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And 1890s money. He did that for quite a while. I mean, he didn't have to move. They could literally just wheel him out, and that was play this show, and he will get wheeled back home, as it started to say.
Yeah.
sort of. So musicianship, and then scale of availability, as well as being able to travel more
Mm-hmm.
easily. You know, so and then sax horns were no longer in favor. We're starting to see the improvements in the horns on all levels.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that too. So yeah, like I said, the last time you saw a sax horn being sold was in the Sears catalog in 1895.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the
It just progressed from there. You know, you got more improved horns. You know, Charles Kahn comes on the scene in 1875,
mm-hmm.
and starts making his horns and stuff like that. It's just, you know, the refinement of the brass is still continuing even today.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, in terms of manufacture, and then of course, you know, the skill levels are still improving. You have no idea what you're going to run into nowadays. Certainly, if you've heard of Sergei Nakarikov, you know, he could just play the thing like he's smoking a cigarette. You don't know. He's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, it's amazing what people can come up with.
For sure. You had mentioned by the end of the Dodworth Band, they had been bringing in select woodwinds as primarily soloists. At the end, were they considered a mixed band of woodwind and brass, like more like even kind of like a Gilmore band, or was it still primarily brass with just a few woodwinds sprinkled in?
They were among the first to hire woodwind players in the 1850s or so. Now they still thought of themselves more as a brass group, a cornet band. Really, it was the thing. But they were, like I said, they were so flexible and versatile. They didn't mind it to have, if you wanted just a faction of just reeds and brass at some function, they would be happy to provide you with that. Or if you needed string band or a full orchestra, or something like that.
Makes sense.
But certainly Harvey's mind was on the brass, the cornet band, the brass end.
Gotcha.
Alan's mind was more of the dance academies, and then the younger brothers, they helped wherever they could, whether they were in the music store or at the publishing house, or playing whatever they were playing, whether it be trombone or pipe or cornet or whatever else they were doing. No, and like I said, we don't hear about Mary, whatever he or the wife played, she played, or her mother played. So we don't know anything about that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the band folded, disappeared, and then
it was. I guess it's time. Everything runs out after its time, and when the time is up.
Yeah, so. But then fortunately for us, there was a 20th century resurrection of the band. Can we maybe now transition into both what and why the band is today? And then that can transition back into your involvement and how you got involved with the group after your masters and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so here we go to 1985. Then this is the new Dodworth Band. It wasn't called that at first, but this would start back in summer of 1985. Now, just prior to that, the person who thought this up first, his name is Alex Pollock, and he is a Detroit city architect. This is a guy who would, if you need a building put up in a certain way in downtown Detroit, he was the man, or at least his office to go to.
Yeah,
but he was also fascinated by antique brass too, and he had a fairly sizable collection that I understand at the time of these antiques, the sax horns. So Alex Pollock here, he would like to visit over the Henry Ford, the Greenfield Village, and they have a collection in the back of stuff from like 1830s and 40s of instruments and they have a huge collection of stuff. And luckily I got to visit one time. Anyway, he would go, and the curator at the time was Bob Eliason. And he's a tuba player, and he's now living in Connecticut, I think. Anyway, they would collaborate, they would get together and stuff. And finally they said, you know what, why don't we try to play some of these ones? What the heck, you know? So that's kind of started in the summer of 85. And that's where it's first, and they wanted a living history project. Okay. So there was another band at the time. It was called the Fifth Michigan. They're still around, but they're kind of laying low quite low right now too.
Mhm.
And so they grabbed some people from there to start help with that, to help with Alex's project now. Okay. So they got it going. I got a few people, and some people, if Alex would either sell or let them people borrow horns for a while until they could buy them. And originally they called themselves the Detroit Light Guard Band. Again, thinking with that military, I don't know why. Oddly enough, some legal issues because of the name arose,
Hmm.
so they couldn't do that. In the meantime, they got the first uniforms that they were wearing at the time in the mid '80s. Here is they were a donation. I think somehow Alex persuaded the Detroit Street Railway to donate some older uniforms, and these were kind of small with really really short hats, and they also had DSR across the top on the hat. So with that in mind, you can't go out saying Detroit Light Guard Band, but you have DSR on the front of your head. So they changed it to so Alex understood some of the history from what I understand. I wish I would have met this man years ago. I still haven't. He's still around. But he understood some of the history with Dodworth. So he said Dodworth Saxhorn for the horn, Reserve Band. And then on one of the drum heads, it's still printed on there in our collection.
Nice.
So, but again, with the legal stuff, okay. So they couldn't use the uniforms anymore. I guess some of the old railway workers, because you remember, if you've ever been in the Detroit before 1980s, or there's still plenty of the rails from the streetcars going throughout the city.
Gotcha.
Okay. And yeah, so those people, of course, would have worked on those street trolleys, and I guess they had a real problem with somebody borrowing their uniforms.
Gotcha.
I don't know. So I had to give them back. So eventually they got other uniforms that looked somewhat military, but not really. They could pass eating it for civilian as well as military. They looked a bit more military style because they only buttoned to about your belly button, and then it was wide open.
Gotcha.
Whatever. And eventually dropped the word reserve, except for the one on the drum. So nowadays we dress more like I do right now. I would still have a frock coat, but it's more of a civilian style frock coat. Okay. Or the ladies that we have in our band have the choice of dressing with the vest and tie and the nice shirt, or they could employ our dress uniform manager to see if they can procure a dress. Very light, simple. I wouldn't say peasant dress, but it was something you would wear. You might find in small town America in that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess that's more appropriate also for you guys because as you were saying, the original Dodworth Band was only really military for those 3 months around the time of the Second Battle of Manassas, right? They didn't really have that strong military affiliation during their time. Yeah.
No, they were too busy training them.
Yeah. There you go.
Seriously, they were too busy training the military to be in the military.
Yeah.
Okay. Though, if you look at their uniforms, now they designed their own uniforms too. They had at least 5 different designs, from what I understand. They kind of look military, though. I mean, if you looked at a military, I'm not talking like a rebel uniform or a Yankee uniform, but they had a military like style to them. If you remember, you've seen the picture now a couple of times with Harvey, right? That's pretty square and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Form fitting. And with the big fat stuff on it, and what I forgot what those are called, the tassels. I wanted to say
the epaulets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spell them however you want. Okay. So generally we would dress more as civilian now. And we don't mind having the ladies in the band. I mean, we have great musicians that happen to be the fair gender.
And are you guys mixed instrumentation in terms of woodwind and brass, or are you purely brass in the band?
In the past, we have, like I mentioned, Tim Holmes before. He would play his simple system piccolo. He did not pick up brass instrument.
Yeah.
We do have woodwind players posing as brass players, though. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the people that started since '85, who eventually became our business manager for 20-something years, he's originally a clarinet and bassoon player. Here we go back with the bassoons. But he studied bassoon. He was in clarinet at high levels of education, but he knew how to play brass. And he had actually started as a storyteller. He quit being a band director to be a storyteller, and having to pick up this one particular tenor horn a couple of years prior to starting with this band. He's still with us, thank God. He's a good man to have, but he doesn't. He never fancied himself a brass player ever, but he knew how to play at least the mid-range parts and certainly the tenor part.
Yeah, nice.
And that's just one instance. Some people just like to play brass because they can. So, I mean, we are a very well-traveled band. We strive to uphold the same reputation as the original Dodworth Band. We've played in places like several of the states. You can see a lot of this on our website, which I'll give later on. We played for the opening of the Baseball Hall of Fame back in 1994, since while we were there for the president at the time, Bill Clinton. And we can be heard on 3 of Ken Burns' films. One is Baseball. With this, nobody has a cassette player anymore, but I happen to have a recording of old time baseball songs with Ernie Harwell being the announcer. So you'll hear a few of these tracks from the mid '90s from this cassette on his baseball documentary. The opening of the Jazz, and then recently with the Roosevelts, which is one of his more recent films in the last 10 years or so or less. We kept as busy, and sometimes we're the busiest of the 19th century brass bands of this time period, up to even 70 concerts per year.
Wow,
if you can imagine that. And we actually, even though we're a 501c3, we could pull in a 6-figure revenue. I'm not saying how many. We've had a couple of spin-offs, including a Cyclone high wheel band where people are sitting on those penny farthings. Do you remember those things?
Oh, yeah.
You got the 9-foot wheel in the front and the 2-inch wheel in the back.
Yeah.
But they're playing their horns on top of that, or drums, or whatever they got.
Yeah.
Crazy like that. As well as our Dodworth duo, which happens to be one of our actor singers plays guitar, and one of and several of the sopranos, well, one at a time, so it'd be a duo, and they would sometimes go out and sing and play. And nearly all the music that we gather is from 19th century. We have a couple from the 18th century, like Christmas tunes. And a couple of 20th century ones that Greenfield Village has made or has requested an arrangement for. So I get called for that. There are about 420 titles in the book, and about half of them are my arrangements or edit editions.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's how many I've done so for the band.
Very
Our
neat.
band, they tune at A447 or 448. Back then, in that time period, nothing was really nailed down in terms of what general note you tune to. The military liked the higher pitch of it. Although with the cornet model, it did not. It would say, it would be bright, but it would still be mellow enough to not be so bright you had to turn away with the conical sound.
Yeah.
They could get higher, of course, or lower according to weather.
About how many members are in the organization / how many are used usually on a performance?
We keep a roster. I almost said like corral of 50 people. but we use at maximum 17, and that would be 14 brass and percussion, with percussion, and then 2 singers plus a director.
Gotcha.
And that we can whittle it down to an 8 top if you need it. So there would be no percussion, just 8 brass players.
Gotcha.
So anywhere between that 8 and the 17. It could be even with the 8, if you wanted to have an announcer separate, so that'd be 9 people. You could do that, or 10 piece would at least include percussion, and so on. Now, I remember one of your questions asked if are we reenactors? Actually, no, since we don't, like I said, we don't affiliate with any kind of brass, military idea. Now, the type of people we do have in our group, a good majority, believe it or not, are band directors, whether they're currently working or retired. It's quite a number of them. So, and we have a good mix of amateur to pro as well, and of course there's me. What we do instead of being tied to reenacting stuff. I mean, I don't think any of us really want to get syphilis on purpose, or get shot at, because I've heard of those stories. Okay.
Oh yeah, there's accidents. Yeah.
I'm not talking accident. The people getting shot for real with real ammo. Okay.
Yeah.
Be out in the middle of the Briar Field, per se, and they're getting shot at with all of these, these guns which have no particular accuracy whatsoever. They're getting, and they're even getting the diseases of the day. And I'm like, okay, to each his own. I don't know. I'll stay over here. Thank you.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Right. So no, we're not real, but we strive instead to bring the entertainment, and in terms of using a segment, it's kind of somewhat vaudevillian in scope, but the idea is to write these theatrical segments such that they include a topic of the day. It could be really anything, and it could be, so we could talk about, like, say, maritime, or it could be nobody allowed to drink or smoke or something like that, or it's a whole variety of things. Talk about women during the battlefields, or even the children of the battlefield. Now, there's a fabulous story for another day. So I'm not going to talk about, and then include music to surround that kind of thing. So we had, like, even segments about Lincoln. Lincoln was kind of a depressed guy, so but we try to include some things that he would really tune into, such as Dixie, or this really somber song called Your Mission, and some other things that he would be known for. He always liked to joke about, I only know two church hymns. One's called The Old Hundredth, the other one isn't. Okay. That's out of one of his papers. So in that sense, we still try to model ourselves after the Dodworth in terms of, being a premier band, national reputation, which I think we've accomplished by now. It's the 36th year for us.
Maybe we can jump into how you became involved after your master's with the band, and what your role is with the band currently.
So I'm back from college, obviously. I'm playing wherever I can, and I'm working a little bit. My dad was a plumber, so the family joke is that he installs it, I play it.
The plumbing, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because if you look, you just look behind me, you can see all the plumbing kind of sticking up out of the furniture. Yeah, I got, you can see, 3 of my 4 baritones, like a couple of horns sticking up, some bugles and whatnot.
Yeah, nice.
And there's a few tubas laying around somewhere. Any rate, excuse me. So about in 1997 fall, when the fall season started, I got invited to play with Macomb Symphony. It's a local regional orchestra. I was invited to play French horn there. I played principal. That same time period, Paul Ekus, I don't know if you've ever met or talked with him. He's a trombonist, but he was the director for both the Dodworth Band at in that time, as well as for Michigan Chamber Brass, something that was kind of modeled on the Philip Jones brass ensemble idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hiring top-notch players such as professors from local universities, regional universities, as well as some people from Detroit Symphony or others. And then there was even me in there, which is interesting. But it was fun to play. So I was invited to play. I remember my old horn teacher from EMU. He said you should play in this Michigan Chamber Brass, fall of '97. So I do that. And Paul Ekus is the one directing, like I said. Another thing that kind of was weird is I get this weird notion, hey, I want to sing again. Because I had sung with my dad in a choir, in a German choir.
Mm-hmm.
But now everything in terms of any kind of tenor voice kind of dropped in the basement, as you can probably hear now. It's like, this is my high range. This is my low range. Just kidding. I really sing soprano.
Yeah.
So I hear about this men's chorus called Measure for Measure. Directed by the choral director at EMU at the time was Leonard Racinto, who has passed now several 2006. And I decided to go there to find out what their next concert is. It happened to be a joint concert with, of all things, Dodworth Saxhorn Band. But I had no idea. I just know to show up at this particular time, but I get there so late. Dodworth Band, I barely catch the tail end of them as they're leaving. I don't think I saw a horn. I only saw I could only remember one face, and that was Mike Darren. Because he was still getting off stage. One of the members of the Dodworth Band. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I just not paying attention to that at all. Until after then when I finally read the program, I'm like, okay. Because remember, I'd seen I'd asked Jay, my tuba teacher, give me a call if he needed a sub for Dodworth a couple years back.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, what? That was Dodworth? Nuts. Oh well. Yeah. Sorry. But I did end up joining the men's chorus the next day, and I was with them a few years. And that was fun. I would just go in the back, of the room and start rumbling. That was my thing, rumble in the back with the basses,
There you go.
Fast forward, I get a call over the ensuing winter. Hey, you want to play in the Dodworth Band? I'm like, sure, why not? I'm guessing Paul liked my playing because he from Michigan Chamber Brass, and J.R. Smith, former tuba teacher who had passed now a few years back, probably endorsed it. Says, yeah, you should have Bernie come play, So I show up to rehearsal, not really knowing what to expect,
Yeah.
And they give me a horn, that same horn where I was at that one private shop.
Yeah, the E flat.
So out of tune. The guy says, I don't know how you managed to play any kind of scale onto that silly thing. And that's the one I've been playing since. And that was February 20th in 1998.
Nice.
And a month later, we go to make our first CD recording. So I'm learning this thing by baptism by fire.
Yeah.
Okay. And here it is. Here it is for you, 1860s, probably a French import, Berliner valves. And I'll just give you an idea. So let me play a scale the way it is now. I'm not going to move any slides except for the valves.
Okay.
All right.
Something like that.
You guys
yeah,
I'm sure you guys are both brass players. I played just to see what we see written scale, right?
Yeah.
Don't watch my fingers. You're gonna get a headache now.
Yeah, yikes.
There are some alternate fingerings on here that just shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
The idea here is when people ask me about this thing, I says, well, what do you do when you tune up? I said, well, tuning while the band is tuning is a spurious act. But tuning while the band is playing a tune, that's a whole nother ballgame. Yeah. I have to make the difference, like I said, between that guy and the basses way behind, right? So why don't you just play a little Gary Owen to give you an idea what I got to do with this thing?
Sure. So next time somebody in our band talks about these instruments don't play in tune, I can't play it, we'll just show them that clip and tell them that any of these instruments can. Yeah.
I have never seen
no
so many
excuse.
alternate fingerings. In
Yeah,
my
no
lifetime.
excuse. Yeah.
You have no excuse. Now, and I have a hard time even excusing upper brass players. Okay. Now, a lot of them are not that bad. That one's probably the worst in terms of tuning, but I love the sound of it. It's the most iconic.
Oh yeah, it sounded great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, but we have plenty of, soprano, B flat and E flat sopranos. But of course you can't do that stuff with the slide. There's not enough room for it.
Yeah.
And I'm still thinking, you got no excuse.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. They're not going to play like your modern day, Shilky or whatever you got, take your pick. Okay. Yeah. They're built with more refinement. Well, I don't have those refinements when they're 150 years old. They're going to play a lot differently. Matter of fact, I call them all my little babies, They all have their own temperaments. They all just, when you're 150 years old, you're going to be kind of fickle anyway. Okay.
So is that now, that alto, is that considered yours at this point, or is that a band-owned instrument?
And I wish. No, it's owned by an individual member in our group who happens to have one of the larger collections. It's not Alex Pollock. Alex Pollock has not been with the band since '94. There was a falling out at the time. And only recently has he tried to bring back the group for like a summer concert, and a couple of people played, and then it's like, well, that's enough of that.
Are the majority of the instruments that are played by the 50 or so members in the group band-owned, or privately owned, or individually owned?
Definitely a private mix of those. I have that here somewhere. Definitely a private mix. Band owned, we owned about 30 so instruments. Then some people have owned their own, whether it's a single or a couple or several. The same person who owns that horn, this alto, owns several baritones of different configurations.
Gotcha.
And even an E flat soprano cornopian. If you can imagine, they're short enough as they are, but then there's even less tubing in this particular one.
Yeah.
And it plays okay. It really does. And it has a dark sound, oddly enough, for an E flat. Or nope. He let me play it a couple of times. And actually, I'm the one who found it. And I thought he would, loan it to the band, but he never actually did. He keeps it sitting up on his fireplace mantle. $1,900 fireplace mantle with decoration. All right.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Would you maybe be able to tell us a little bit of the maybe some of the notable band-owned instruments, if there's any with any notoriety or dedications?
Every band's going to have their own gems. I'm not going to name them all, but I got a good handful here I can tell you about. I used to curate the horns too. The previous guy, who happened to be a tuba player, only understood tubas and baritone.
Gotcha.
And he had no patience for figuring out which one's a B flat alto or a soprano or whatever. He had no patience for doing the job. So then, I was to help him because I like to have these things around,
Yeah.
So having those in my house, when I finally took over as curator for the horns, and I was the first to get paid for this, because it is a lot of work. But at least then I could even further refine my skills as an arranger for this group.
Yeah.
Okay, because now I could sit at home, and play on them as I wanted to, and figure out their limitations as well. And sometimes it happens to be the player.
True.
Usually the first adjustment for these horns, if something's wrong, it's the nut behind the mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Here's a mouthpiece. Here's the nut. Oh,
yeah.
Geez. Yeah, I got dry wit like that. Okay, so we have a Fisk baritone. Now, I don't know if you've seen this before, but Fisk at one point made these really oversized rotors and in a triangle pattern. Okay. And what he did is he made it such that they looked like they were pistons on top of that, but it was just a cylindrical casing that held the spring. But he had this mix of a direct rod going through this little piston like casing with the spring in it to operate the rotor, which was on string action.
Interesting.
And and it also had an ingenious invention at the time. the way to remove water. Now, water keys were already available on horns back in the 1830s. They're just not very commonly made. Okay, you know, with the little, whether it be a clapper valve or something like that. The only horn that really had a water valve or spit valve was Schreiber.
Yeah.
He actually put a rounded ball of a valve in the middle of the tubing, and you would actually have to turn it using a lever to allow the water to be released.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only spit valve I can actually come up with. Otherwise, they're water keys. You know, that just let some water out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but in Fisk's case, Isaac Fisk got anyway. He came up with an idea where he would drill in the crook. So it was on the first and the third valve, because the second valve went up over the valve on top of it. In the first and the third valve, he put a crook. He drilled a small hole in the bottom of the crook, and then took two small pieces of tubing that would fit very close to each other and soldered them up underneath it. So then when it got to be full, all you had to do was take what would be kind of like a drip leg, and you just take this little cap off, and then empty it, and then put it back over the hole. Okay, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, and then we have, I'm going to play another one here in just a second. We have one that's was owned by the Marine Band back in the day, and the pedigree with this is that it's possible that Lincoln heard this particular horn, and by extension, even Dodworth, if you think about it.
No.
Okay, because the Marine Band, being the oldest band, played just as often as Dodworth did, if not more. I don't know,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and they still do. Okay, and that was about 1860s. We bought it from Mark Elrod from New York at one of the shows way back in like late 1990s. And it's an over-the-shoulder E-flat bass. So this was made by Christian Stark, and the metal, as you see, is a nickel silver. Mm-hmm. So it's actually rolled much thinner because the nickel makes the brass alloy stronger. Mm-hmm. So you can roll it much thinner. So if I were to weigh this thing, it's probably about not even a gallon of milk, which is about 8.5 pounds, dripping wet.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
It's so light. It's incredible, but it's held up so well over the years. And here's a sample of it. Again, I got to hold it like a big old roast beef sandwich or something.
Yeah, nice. There you go. I saw the alternate fingerings coming into play on that guy too.
Yeah.
A little bit. Not
as much as the other one.
Slide. If I wanted to, I could do just like I would do on the other one. But this one holds its own pretty reasonably.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I definitely got to sit down there. I mean, it hurts my arm and my back, oddly enough. I stretch my arm in front of me to move that main tuning slide.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so I just played you the horn and tuba, just like my degrees.
Right.
Moving on, we have a John Lathrop Allen E-flat over-the-shoulder alto from about 1855, and it has 4 pinch rotors. It's a setup of the 3+1, so 3 in the one hand and the 1 over here. And the interesting thing is that it's actually an ascending valve.
Oh, interesting.
If you understand what ascending valve means or not, I'll explain anyway. Ascending valve means that piece of tubing is already in play before you depress the lever. And then when you depress the lever, it's actually bypassed. So you've cut off that length. So that's why it'd be ascending. And it's considered like a trill valve. It also makes for a lot of alternate fingerings combinations, especially if you're trying to play in tune. And as you can see, these things, they're not bad, but they can be. Okay. So that was a real interesting find. That came in as a set with another over the shoulder I'll tell you about in a minute. We have an anonymous B flat upright Berliner. So a little thing like that with Berlin valves, and it's a B flat cornet. And if you look on my Facebook page, you'll see it. I played it last summer. Yes. We have a Leonard E flat alto and a B flat tenor. Now they're built very tall, such that the Leonard, the tenor, is almost 3 feet tall. It's incredibly long. Okay, it's not terribly skinny, but he just made the tubing such that it would be stretched out. And even the alto looks more like a tenor horn itself, with a really wide bell and the flare. Okay, and the tenor also has pinch rotor, since it's but I mean the Allen valves, as you might say, as well. We also have an anonymous double B flat bass, 3 valves. It's also an upright, so it looks a bit more like your modern day tuba, but just 3 Berliners in the middle. Something I found for like $900.
Wow.
Yeah. And as curator, that was certainly my job, was to beef up the inventory, and I think I did a decent job of it. We have a Bauer E flat upright bass, which has top action rotors in the same spot. Now that one's a really nice compact tuba. It'd really be good for a solo work if you really want to try it. Now that one, the over the shoulder, is not bad. Because it's so iconic, nobody gets to see it too often. So I get a lot of oohs and ahs for that thing. We do have three horns that are marked Dodworth themselves. One's a B flat soprano, looks like your common day cornet with the shepherd's crooks and the double wishbone, and it's marked Allen. So something you might see in our band's method, one of those cornets. With your Perronnet pistons, and it was marked Allen Dodworth on the engraving. And then we have an over the shoulder alto. That one was part of the set with the Allen over the shoulder 4-valver. This was a 3-valver. Again, also both of them were nickel silver. And this is even though you play it sideways, it's still considered top action. Rotary valves, and it's also string action. And that one's marked Harvey Dodworth with a shield, and it's probably made by Stratton, because I think Stratton or his workers made the same shield, since Dodworth never actually built their own horns by themselves.
Gotcha.
They would get someone else to do it. And then we have most recently as a B flat valve trombone with 3 rotors, which also, and it's in brass, not nickel silver, but it does have the same shield shape, I want to say, with Harvey's name again put on it. Now, and then, like I said, so the band, those are band owned gems per se, and then people have several people have their own. Okay, so in terms of arranging for the Dodworth, I told him a couple of months in after we did the recording, hey, if you wanted somebody to do some arrangements, please call me. So summer of 1999, since I started in 98, he gives me my first audition assignment. Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik. The Dodworth Band? Okay, whatever. Apparently everybody liked it, and we still use it here and there. And then since he liked it, he had me writing more stuff, even including Christmas stuff, as was whenever they requested something, and they actually paid me a little bit to do the work, and now to arrange stuff that would sound more, I guess, period appropriate. I can't say authentic, because that's really somebody's opinion. I would say period appropriate. I took a couple of duds, before I got the style just right. But I was still interjecting some of my 20th century, proclivities, I suppose. Not ridiculous, but they would be tasteful.
Yeah, of course.
I don't really like cheese up a piece. I can't stand that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically thinking 20th century kind of mode. So some of my early arrangements for Dodworth, outside of that Mozart, have this feeling of, well, it's not really 19th century. And other people that we've hired as occasionally to do an arrangement definitely don't follow that idea.
Mm-hmm.
They do what they know from what they know now.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of stuff that sounds like 1980s and 70s and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, so like I said, half the titles that are in the book are filtered per se through me. And I mean, they kept coming back for more. I'm like, okay, sure. So I have edited lots of stuff too, where the music was so faded, you didn't know what was the note and what was the bar line or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, you got plenty of examples of that, or even photo negative copies, white notes on black paper.
Right.
What? You know,
Yeah.
by 2000, like I said, I was finally instrument curator, so that helped me refine the arrangements. So if you want me to just give one like 5 minutes on the process and approach, it's basically like most people. First of all, don't do any harm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I try to stay with original intent, at least at first. If you change anything, like a key or a tempo, I try to not cheese it up too badly, you know, and I also want to keep things where it's not too boring, because I've seen a lot of stuff where you certainly need to learn the voices and the voicing roles, you know, your orchestration. I guess the aspect has changed a little bit, because you can't just give low parts to an alto. That doesn't work in this band. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know people who want to write in the basement for the alto part, and I'm like, we don't have those notes. I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I've even come up for one guy, I finally had to write it down when he gave us a couple of arrangements that were like that. I said, here's a scoring guide. Please use it.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. Seriously. I mean, it was bad. You don't write low E for an alto horn with 3 valves, please.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay? You can do a much better sound quality and a homogeneous sound quality on a larger instrument that has that note in their regular normal range.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then a lot of the stuff, we have a lot of titles that are vocal pieces. So that changes a lot it's a whole other set of problems. So now you got to know what kind of person you're dealing with. You know, if they're going to be a diva or a lack thereof, thank God that we have some. Seriously, you can go both ways. I mean, diva is not a gender specific term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And neither is pro or professional or amateur.
Mm-hmm.
But I've sometimes dealt with all three in one person. You know, professional, amateur, diva. So take your pick. You know, and then you got to think, you know, how is this voicing compared to nowadays? Well, you mentioned the brass quintet. Well, in brass quintet, you know, you pretty much can write in any key equally, right? But you got to think, so some keys are more equal than others.
Yeah.
And so an E flat band works better as a flat key band. I mean, we can play a couple of chords, but we don't want to be staying in G major if we're an E flat band for the entire tune. Okay. So learn to figure it out some other way without getting muddy. Some people want to write stuff so dang low, it gets ridiculously muddy. And so you don't have the low range. You know, you can't write A flat for a bass that's below the step because it's not there.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't expect everyone to have 4 valves. They did make some with 4 valves, but not all of them.
Yeah.
So you cannot expect that kind of thing. And I also learned to do engraving by hand. I mean, literally measures. That word measure is not by circumstance. I literally had to measure out measures before I wrote one note. Sometimes it takes me a whole hour to set up an entire page before I put one note head in.
Wow.
So so in comparison to a quintet, I mean, I'm just expanding upon how is this going to fit when we have a 14-piece band? I mean, you're just looking at something, right? You got to know how to pick it apart. And then what is it? And then I'm also writing percussion parts too. Yeah. Well, there's no indication of, okay, play drum here, right?
Right.
Okay. That kind of thing. So what I'm really doing is expanding it to fit the style and the scoring needed. Right. And I was going to cue up Vacant Chair, but as one example, that's okay. And recently I'm doing a reconstruction of a band. It's called the Ellsworth Band out of Maine. Now, it doesn't nothing to do with the soldier that died. That was the first casualty of Civil War, having to be friends with Lincoln as well. Now, it's Ellsworth, Maine, and they had their own little band. And I got a set of parts from Yari Villanueva. He says, I ain't got time to do these. You want to do them? So here's a little chart. You know, you can see there's a lot of pieces, a lot of books missing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from what's just an X. So I'm taking like from what I have and whatever I'm filling in, I'm trying to match the style from between what's there, what they're giving me through those clues, and what I know from the last 20 some years of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten about this. There was 15, and some of these books, like as you can see, they don't have all the parts.
Yeah,
you know. And obviously, there's 3 there. That I'm rating it for the Dodworth's full band.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 books that are just non-existent.
Yeah.
Okay, and sometimes there's even just partial measures or a lot of mistakes. People had to write their own, and they had to write their own parts in their own books. And so, if you're not that educated, it shows.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
And some of the markings are really foreign to me. And even though I know how to read some of that old script and their marking, but the way they do it in these books, especially this one, is real interesting.
Yeah,
an interesting
wow.
challenge. So, and then you asked about playing period arrangements. I would say mostly from the band folders I mentioned, like these oleos. Here are these oleos from before. Out of those books and the editings I've done. In terms of authenticity, well, we strive to maintain as much of it as possible, but it's our interpretation of what's authentic, through our research.
Yeah.
Not necessarily someone else's. So it kind of boils down to what we know, and we can base our opinion on it.
Maybe as a way of kind of tying a nice bow on the end of the interview proper here, I was wondering what your thoughts are, what your opinions are in terms of having this music or these bands kind of exist in now the 21st century, what their value is and why you think they should continue to exist and people continue playing and listening to this music.
If you've seen our website recently, it's been updated. It's much more user-friendly. They can explain that question about as good as I can right now. It is relevant and meaningful because it is our history. It is our heritage, even though it was imported, but it landed here, and we made it our own. And that the fact that it's not even taught in school. And another thing is, when I looked up, I forgot the year when New York Phil was founded. And if you go on their website, it says, New York Phil founded in 1842 by UC or Urelli Corelli Hill and some local musicians. They totally blow off 60 years of Dodworth influence, including to that group. Granted, it's one of the oldest orchestras, full orchestra that we know, as in that capacity. Because orchestras back in and before then were fairly more chamber orchestras. Until like 1830 or something. So whenever Beethoven finally expanded it, and Spohr and some other people finally expanded it, you have full faction of winds, expanded strings, all the percussion you could possibly imagine during that time. Okay, but it's relevant and meaningful to know this because it is our history.
Yeah, I mean, the Dodworth Band really does a great job of, preserving and advocating for that, band history and band culture that we have in the United States. And so, where can people go online if they're looking to find out more about the band and the recordings that you guys have made and all that kind of stuff?
Definitely go to our website. It's called Dodworth.org. We have a booking agent now. It's Great Lakes Performing Artists Association. If you're interested in booking, we used to do just the Great Lakes, the states that touch the Great Lakes. So between New York and Minnesota, bordering the Great Lakes, but now we've finally gone national because of the COVID issue. We said, heck, we can't just limit ourselves to that little bit.
Mm.
So there's a number right there, as well as a website, www.greatlakespaa.org. Performance options, as you can see here on the card, we're a full 14-piece band, which like I said, we can break down to as little as 8 pieces. Again, give Aileen Rower a call at the Great Lakes Performing Artists Association. We can make concerts with vocalists doing sung as well as scripted segments on baseball, Lincoln, temperance, women of the Civil War, children of the Civil War, making of America type things, all kinds of different subjects. We have about at least 20, close to 30 different segments we can present to you. Mm-hmm. We can certainly be a strolling band. We don't have to be sat in one spot. We can be standing up and then move to another spot, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We can do parades, short ones. Don't make us march more than a half a mile, please. Civil War or Victorian balls. We even recently tried to do one what was called a bustle ball. So that was music between the late 19th century, so we'll say between 1890s to 1920s. Mm-hmm. So, and I did a few arrangements. That's when they were still mixing Victorian music, but having some more of this newer stuff, like even some jazz influences, mixed into the ballroom. And we have people who are dance professionals. They come out of Cincinnati. Forget-Me-Not Dancers is their name. They're fabulous. They know how to teach all these dances, and they even perform the dances themselves and demonstrate them. So we can customize stuff to fit your events. Yeah. And with my own self, if you want to get a hold of me, so you can call me. I don't have a website, but I do have my own email address, which is BLK Brass Monkey. Spell the monkey part with no E at hotmail.com. Of course, if you want me to do any arrangements, I'll be glad to help you out. I mean, I do have a fee for that we can talk about.
For sure.
And I'll try to accommodate your scoring as much as I can.
Thank you for your time speaking with Steve and us, giving us your time, talking about your background, your experience with the Dodworth Saxhorn Band, the history of the band, your process with arranging. It's all been really awesome and insightful, and we're excited to share it with people. So thank you for everything.
Yeah. Oh, it was a pleasure to do so.
Thank you again so much to Bernhard Kirchner for coming onto the show. It was awesome getting to hear the history of the Dodworth Saxhorn Band, the history of that family and Harvey and Alan, as well as a lot of the information pertaining to the current Dodworth Saxhorn Band, currently up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So thank you so much, Bernhard, for coming on.
Yeah, definitely. We really can't thank him enough for taking the time out of his day to speak with us, and we really enjoyed getting to talk with him. If you like what you're hearing, as we said at the top of the episode, you can support us on Patreon and Teespring. We're also on all social media platforms, and we have a YouTube channel as well, where we've released full episodes and then smaller, excerpted parts of the episodes as well. So that way, if you have an hour and a half, or if you only have 10 minutes, we've got a video for you. So you can go to our YouTube page and subscribe there. That really helps the show out.
This episode's featured album is from Dodworth Saxhorn Band. It's their album titled Traditions of the Season. This is a holiday album that was put out by the band, one of their most recent releases, actually. And even though this episode is releasing in April, this is a holiday album, but we are selecting it because actually all the arrangements on the album are of Bernhard's arrangements that he was able to do. So if you would like to hear an album of all of his music and get into the holiday spirit, go on over to the show notes on our website. We'll provide a link directly to the Dodworth Saxhorn Band's website where you can purchase Traditions of the Season. Thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you next episode.